Hello, my pretties. I'm the book guy. Today we're going to talk about Joe Abercrombie's The World of the First Law and pretty much his entire published work today. Now, even though this is a favorite series of mine, it's not exactly a beloved series of mine. It fills me with respect and admiration, but certainly not warm, fuzzy feelings, that's for sure. This series is famous for being in the subgenre of Grimdark. So that's a genre that's grim and dark. So yeah, it's a pretty dark and violent series, but I think the darkness has gained such a reputation that it sort of outshines, if you will, all the other brilliant aspects of this series. I mean, how many of you have had a friend recommend this series and they're like, oh mate, you gotta read this series because it's violent and brutal and there's murder and torture and war crimes, and you're like, I need better friends.
Oh, please continue.
I thought maybe you... Oh.
So that's why I want to introduce this series to you, because it definitely deserves your attention. Joe has literally written some of the best books in the last decade. I just don't think they get enough hype. I mean, let's face it, all the violent parts get all the hype for themselves. So let's look at all the good stuff in this series and talk about how violence and darkness can actually shape stories in very interesting ways. Also, full disclosure, this is going to be a long video because I have a lot of love for this series and I want to talk about all of it at once. But please try to stick with me to the end because this second trilogy here, Age of Madness, is literally one of the best damn things I've ever read in my life. It's so good. And it kills me because on BookTube and Bookstagram, people only talk about Trilogy One. I'm like, guys, this is the good stuff. Am I the only one seeing this? So before I launch into the specifics, I want to give you a brief overview of Joe Abercrombie's published works. Okay, so it does start with this trilogy here. This one's called The First Law. Ta-da! Now, The First Law became the name for the whole series, but it does refer to just this trilogy. This trilogy here really does showcase Joe Abercrombie's work, what the style in the world is like, and what Grimdark means for the series. So it's a really good entry point for the series. Then we have these 3 books here and a short story collection. So the 3 books here are standalone. So they are not a trilogy. They really do work on their own, still set within the same world. You could technically call it a trilogy of standalones, but it's not a trilogy. They're standalones. It's only a trilogy if it's actually one connected story.
Apparently that's a trigger for me.
Yeah, apparently.
Sorry. Then there's Trilogy 2, The Age of Madness, which is the best. It includes an industrial revolution and a regular revolution. Yay! I truly believe that as good as all of this stuff is, it was really just practice for this. This is a masterpiece. Oh, drop the sword. And over here we have the Shattered Sea trilogy. Okay, so this is not connected to the world of First Law. This is a completely different world. It's a bit more like Viking fantasy, you know, on the ocean. It is a young adult series that is also grimdark. So think grimdark, but without the violent aspects. And I'll explain more about that one when we get to it. So bear that in mind. I do want to introduce the entire collection, all 13 books in Abercrombie's published works, because the whole damn thing is worth reading. But please stick with me until I get to this one, because this is the good one. I cannot emphasize that enough. Today we're going to go section by section, starting at Trilogy 1, The First Law. Long ago, the world was filled with humans and demons, until the great wizard Eaz used magic to banish all demons to the other side. They still live there to this day, waiting to come out. That's why Eaz created the First Law. Do not contact the other side. For the love of God, do not contact the other side. Today, the country known as the Union is facing a very strange threat. Both of their neighboring countries to the north and to the south have spontaneously decided to attack and invade at the same time. Seems a little bit too convenient to be coincidence. Something's going on here. Unfortunately, the king of the Union is now bedridden with a debilitating illness, and the country is now being run by a bunch of greedy nobles who see this as all as nothing but a chance to line their own pockets with cash. In this dark hour comes Bayaz, one of the last magicians on this planet. Bayaz was there at the founding of the Union thousands of years ago, and he will not see it fall, even if he's the only one left in this corrupt world who's determined to do something about it. So this first trilogy has 3 main point of view characters and then 3 secondary point of view characters. And just for time's sake, we're just going to look at the 3 main ones. The first of those is Logan, a great warrior in the North. His heroic feats have earned him the nickname the Bloody Nine, also because he has 9 fingers. Logan just managed to secure peace in the North, finally, by putting his friend Bethod on the throne. And then Bethod immediately betrayed him, tried to kill him, and then went back on all of his promises for peace and launched a war on the Union. So Logan is now determined to do whatever it takes to get vengeance. Logan has always had a darkness within him, a certain lust for violence, yet he's tired of it. He hates it. He hates that his entire life has been nothing more than fighting and killing. That's why he tried to set up his friend on the throne, to stop all the fighting, so that maybe Logan could finally have a chance to step away from it and even become a good person. Logan's whole story is about, for the first time in his whole life, he doesn't want to fight. Logan is a lot like the Hulk in more ways than one, because he spends his entire life avoiding the fight because he knows he will win it. So next we meet Giselle. He's a super hot ladies man from a rich family who's lived a life of luxury. This guy is spoilt and selfish. He uses his wealth and privilege and connections to join the army at a much higher rank than he is qualified. Now he's leading people he's got no idea what to do with. Giselle spends all of his time training for a sword fighting competition, or should I say, barely training. The guy is half-assing it so hard. So I'm guessing we all kind of hate Giselle right about now, right? Good, you're supposed to. Giselle's arc in this trilogy is all about learning to care for other people besides himself. He starts as literally one of the most selfish people you'll ever meet, and by the end, I'm not saying he's a sweetheart exactly. I mean, it is still grimdark, and also learning to care about people can sometimes lead to heartache and pain. So let's just say Giselle's in for a few surprises in this trilogy. The final big character here is the best of them all, Sandan Glokta. Now, Glokta is a fan favorite because he's quite possibly one of the most complicated characters ever put to pen. You see, Sandan Glokta used to be a famous hero. He won all the sword fighting competitions, and during a battle, he was the first over the wall into the enemy city, which backfired terribly. Instead of winning glory, Glokta got captured and tortured for years. Now he's a cripple. His once young and handsome body is deformed and broken. People look at him in terror and disgust.
Dear God, what is that thing?
So what does Glokta do for a living now after years of torture? Well, the one thing he knows intimately: torture. You may ask, how does someone experience such horror himself and then want to pass it on to others? Well, this is where Glokta's complexity comes into it. See, he's experienced so much violence, he's almost numb to it all. It all just means nothing to him. So Glokta is not just a torturer, he's an inquisitor. So he's searching for the truth. You might honestly call him the detective of this series. His role is to search for the mysteries and uncover the truth. Glokta is super smart. As nasty of a guy he is, he's actually the most likable in this series because his charisma is just off the charts. This guy is so charming. He can, even while looking like an absolute gargoyle, he can walk into the room and just charm everyone. He's almost always the smartest in the room too. So what motivates this guy? Well, not really much of anything. Not good nor evil. No, he just wants to be efficient. He's kind of ruthless like that. Alright, these plot lines are so freakingly well executed. They're really fantastic. So Abercrombie is a planner when it comes to writing. He plans his trilogy in advance. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find this quote again. I'm really sorry about that, but I believe I once saw him say that even though each trilogy gets published one per year, roughly around the same time, it actually takes him 5 years from starting book one, writing book one, to finishing and publishing book 3, because there's so much effort that goes into the planning stage and so much work that he does in the editorial stage to make it all so neat. He's one of those writers where every scene is contributing to either the big picture or a character arc, or it just gets cut. I found that even the longer books in this series, such as The Last Argument of Kings and Best Served Cold, they're the 2 big ones, they were still pretty fast-paced. For me, at least. I've heard some people say they were a bit slower. But overall, it means that the plots are very tightly done. So book 1 focuses a lot, yes, on introducing all the characters, all the players in this game, and the state of the world. Yet pretty soon, the plot spread into 3 different branches. There are characters fighting the Northmen in an army, in a big military action. There are people in the south who are holding off a siege and sort of a big city management arc. And the third group is led by Bayaz, who's got a posse, and he's on a quest quest to find lost magic that might just have the power to save the Union. The thing that I love about these plot lines is they don't take the whole trilogy. Do you ever read a series like The King Killer Chronicles, where you get a plot line in book 1 and you're like, oh, that's interesting, I wonder what goes on with there. And then you realize that's going to be the only plot line for the entire trilogy, and you've got to wait till book 3 to actually see the end of it. Well, that's what I like about Abercrombie. He sets up a plot line, it progresses, there's a confrontation, a big climax, then it's over, and a new plot line gets introduced. That's just as interesting, if not better. And I just adore this writing style because everything's always moving forward. There's always something new to keep your attention. I mean, it does make it a bit difficult to summarize plot lines in a YouTube video, but it was worth it. All right, you've been very patient. I can hear you through time and space. I know what you're waiting for. Let's talk about Grimdark. Now, as I said at the start, Grimdark does have a reputation for violence and brutality. And yeah, it's there, okay? It's certainly in these books. Now, if you're like me, that's kind of incentive to read it. That makes it more appealing. But if it's not your thing, just hit pause on that panic button for 1 second. You see, Grimdark does have violence, but it's actually a lot more than just violence. I mean, violence alone is not appealing enough to read a book. So here's a little overview of what makes Grimdark so special and what you can expect from it and from the world of the First Law. Number 1. Realism. This genre has absolutely zero Hollywood vibes. These stories are more like what you would expect from reading a history book rather than a regular novel. So real history is chaotic and violent, the good guys don't always win, and wars are never between good and evil, just between sides. That's what you get here. You don't get those Hollywood cliches and tropes. This is a very anti-trope genre. Anti-climax. One of my favorite scenes in this whole series is one where a protagonist is fighting one of the best swordsmen in the world. Now, our hero is kind of holding their own for an entire page of text, even though it's kind of clear that the swordsman's toying with them. But then suddenly, their friend comes to the rescue, and now it's our hero and their friend plus this guy. It's 2 versus 1, and we think, oh, here we go. We're going to get a big 10-minute showdown. We're going to get Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan versus Maul, and it's going to be epic. Except what we get is literally a line and a half on one page. The swordsman immediately disarms and wounds one character and deals a death blow to the second. It's that fast. It's shockingly anticlimactic, but this is the power of anticlimax in a story. It may rapidly take all the tension out of one scene, but then it also makes every other scene significantly more tense, because you never know when anticlimax is going to strike again. You never know if failure could swoop in that quickly. Character arcs do not always end well. This is literally the best part of Grimdark. So yes, we do have some characters who grow and become better people, as we sort of expect to see in a usual story, yet some people experience reverse character arcs, where they start as good people and end up bad. Other people have character arcs where they are trying to grow and change and end up remaining exactly who they were at the beginning. See, I love this. This is just like people in real life. I mean, we all like to think that we're all going to grow into better versions of ourselves, but let's face it, how many of us have parents who never go to therapy and get emotionally mature? Ugh. Not everyone changes for the good, sadly, and we see that in Grimdark, because people act like people here. The character that you hated at the beginning becomes so lovable, and the character, the hero you loved at the beginning, well, before long, your feelings have changed so much that you are just like,
You're an insane, degenerate piece of filth, and you deserve to die.
But at the same time, it's not just all darkness. This is what I really want to emphasize. There are still those rare characters who do succeed in being better by the end. And those stories are even more triumphant because you see how much more they had to struggle against to get there. Just a little bit of light will always shine brighter in greater darkness. It's really quite beautiful. Plot lines may not end in success. So failure can and will happen to any plotline. Sometimes the heroes can fight and fight and fight, and the bad guys are still just overwhelming. Or there's betrayal, or there's just bad luck. Good guys don't always win, and that's what makes every action scene unbelievably tense, because you really don't know which way it's going to fall. And also tense because no one's survival is guaranteed, even among main protagonists. This is something that Game of Thrones sort of brought to the popular scope, but it's even more so shown here. No one's arc is destined to be complete. Sex is not always pretty. Sometimes in Hollywood, and even more so in erotic fiction, sex is depicted as very neat and tidy. Everything works. First time, every time. Everyone is super hot and has impossible body types, and the word sheath is very overused. In reality, sex can be tricky for a range of reasons. For example, it's very normal for every pairing to take a bit of practice before you get familiar with each other's bodies and needs and wants.
All performance issues, it's not uncommon. 1 out of 5.
I could go on. The point is, this is how sex is actually represented in Grimdark. Just a little bit messy and not necessarily, the super awesome thing we always hope it is. And I would actually argue that that perspective is probably healthier. Battles are messy. So when you think of a battle scene, you're probably all thinking heroic charges and noble deeds. I mean, let's look at the Battle of Minas Tirith on the Pelennor Fields. Mordor and Gondor are locked in combat, and then Rohan sweeps in with a massive push. Then the Haridrim and the Oliphants sweep in with the massive push. And then Aragorn and the Ghost Army sweep in with the final push. It's awesome and very dramatic, but it's also just a little bit neat. Very tidy. Battle scenes by Joe Abercrombie, on the other hand, they look a lot like the end of this one from Gladiator. Just a big damn ugly mess. Lots of hack, stab, bleeding, screaming, dying, chaos. I mean, we may not like it, but that's what war actually looks like. This is not a series that revels in the glorification of war. Frankly, there is no military propaganda going on here. War is just the worst.
War isn't hell. War is war and hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse.
And I, for one, like it being depicted as such. Okay, so that was a pretty deep dive into Grimdark. That probably could have been a video all on its own, but hey, we were all already here. So Grimdark is a damn compelling genre of fantasy, and it kills me that most people just see it as the blood and guts aspect. I mean, there is a blood and guts aspect. Grimdark is all about telling stories that remove Hollywood tropes and regular cliches. It's all about mimicking real life more than any other genre, and it deserves more attention for that. Okay, now let's look beyond Trilogy One and into the standalone collection. So these standalone books, they take place in very different parts of the world. For example, Best Served Cold takes place in an entirely different continent called Styria that's to the east of the Union. It's a collection of warring states. Meanwhile, Heroes takes place in the north, where we have spent some time in the first trilogy, and there is a bit of a link to the original series with several characters appearing. And then Red Country, on the other hand, takes place over in the other side of the world in the west, in the area known as the Old Empire that's filled with lawlessness and disorder. So their distant locations mean that they're very disconnected to the main series in Trilogy 1 and Trilogy 2. I also want to emphasize again, these are standalones. They are not a trilogy. If you read one of these books and decide, I don't really like standalones, I prefer trilogies, you could skip straight to Trilogy 2, the best one of them all. A quick note on reading order, you genuinely could read these out of order to each other. You could read the standalones kind of in any order to the main trilogies if you wanted to. There's just two little warnings I've got for you. One, there is a character that appears in all three. Esme, come here. Hello, Esme. Oh, aren't you beautiful? She's been zooming around under my feet. Hey, you want a purr? Want a purr for me? She's not purring. She wants to keep zooming. Okay, down you go. Yeah, had to include the black cat in a Grimdark video. So there is one character that appears in all three of these books, Cal Shivers. I think it's Cal Shivers? I read the books, not the audiobooks. From a certain point of view, you could kind of call it the Cal Shivers trilogy. So he is a main character in book 1, he's a secondary character in book 2, and then he has a very important cameo at the end of book 3. So if you read those 3 books out of order, it will mess with his arc, because Cal Shivers does have an arc over those 3 books. Secondly, and this one's a bit tricky, but there's a pretty big plot twist at the end of Trilogy 1, and curiously, we see the same plot twist done again at the end of Heroes. It's a fascinating thing. So Abercrombie gives us the same revelation to us at two different points. Now, it's clearly done this way so that if you haven't read one book, you still get the surprise of the other one. And if you've read one, then you will see the twist coming very clearly in the next one. It does mean you could theoretically read Heroes before the first trilogy, and the big twist would still get you. The catch to this is, once you've seen the twist in one of those books, you'll see it coming in the other. And which one should you prefer? Well, I'd probably recommend doing the trilogy and then seeing it coming in the second one, but then again, that is still up to you. Okay, on to the books themselves. Best Served Cold. This is a revenge story. So Monza Mukato and her brother Benny lead the Thousand Swords, a mercenary group, and they have just won a major victory for their client, Duke Orso, to help him claim his kingdom. But instead of paying them, Orso throws the siblings out the window of his castle and off the cliff. Unfortunately for Orso, Monza survives by landing on her brother's body. Broken and beaten, she swears vengeance on Orso and vows to destroy him and the entire kingdom she just handed him. So Best Served Cold is all about Monza's struggle to assemble a team of killers. Oh, it's so good. And to track down all 6 men who helped Orso kill her, and she wants to kill every last one of them to pay them back. This book focuses a lot on Monza and her struggle with grief, rage, revenge, and her constant temptation to blur the lines in her moral quest. She is such a chaotic, neutral character who can feel herself being drawn deeper into darkness. How far will she go to achieve her goals? Now, here's some awesome news. A movie version of Best Served Cold is actually in pre-production. So Joe Abercrombie announced it on his blog back in May. He himself has written the movie script. So Tim Miller is directing. Tim Miller did Deadpool, the first one, and Terminator Dark Fate, which was the only good sequel after T2. And Rebecca Ferguson is starring as Monza Mukato. And isn't she just perfect? Look at her face. She's beautiful and fierce and kind of rough on the edges. I love it. So I'm extremely excited about this movie adaptation coming because of this one quote from Joe Abercrombie's blog. He said, "Tim and I have been working together on bringing the first lore to the screen in one form or another, among other things, for over a decade. And believe me when I say there is no bigger fan of or champion for these books." So that seems promising. The Heroes. Okay, this book just leaves me gobsmacked. So the Heroes is the name of a random hill in the north. The Union and the North are conducting military action against each other, and for 3 days straight, this random little hill has just become the most important piece of land in the entire world. There is a huge amount of characters in this book. So there's a section in the book that lists all the names characters in the conflict, and it's a really big list. But this book is all about showing a 3-day skirmish from every single perspective involved. It's masterfully done. So the book takes place 7 years after the original trilogy ends, so there are a lot of side characters from the Trilogy One that appear in this novel. It has the most relevance to the main storyline out of the 3 standalone books. That's actually all I'm going to say about it, because this is a grimdark look at war itself, and it's definitely worth reading. Also, there's this hilarious and dark comedy plotline about a character who's suicidal, so he keeps throwing himself recklessly into battle, but his recklessness keeps making him win every time, and people keep thinking he's a hero. It's dark humor at its finest. Red Country. This is the smallest book that Abercrombie has done, and it's still really damn good. So Shy is a young girl with a very violent criminal past, and her stepfather Lamb even more so. So when raiders burn their town and kidnap dozens of children, these 2 polite small town nobodies go all Liam Neeson on them.
I will find you, and I will kill you.
When this duo need a bit more firepower to take on their enemies, they team up with a certain untrustworthy mercenary leader and his religious lawyer, who is mockingly named Temple. Little do they realize Temple is the only thing keeping this particular mercenary from becoming worse than the raiders themselves. Red Country is a story about redemption, and I think it's a great idea to explore that, particularly in the grimdark setting. Do real people get redemption? Do they deserve redemption? And I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say this book is linked more to Trilogy One than you might first suspect. Now, as for Sharp Ends, the short story collection, I am usually not a big fan of short stories. You might be able to tell this by looking at my YouTube channel, but I like series, really big series, right? That's what I talk about exclusively. So standalone little stories just tend to feel really low stakes to me, and I don't really get that interested. Yet Sharp Ends is a different story. It's probably one of my favorite short story collections, up there with Neil Gaiman's short story collections. One of the reasons for that, so there are 13 short stories in this book. 4 of them are all from an original character called Chev, a particularly talented thief. So nearly a third of this book are all short stories for about one person in different stages of life. So it does feel a bit more like a novel than collections normally do. Also, many of the short stories here, they are like deleted scenes from the main series, or scenes retold from someone else's perspective. There's one little story about a happy little family man going about his job, and then we, the reader, realize, oh, that's from that book. Oh, that scene's about to happen. And we realize exactly how this nice little man's going to have his entire day ruined. It is a grim, dark story, but it's all about what about those extras in the background of the main story? And it's a fascinating little tale. Also, Sharp Ends is a pretty short book. It's just over 300 pages, so you can knock it out pretty quickly. 2 things to keep in mind. Sharp Ends was published after these 6 novels, so it should be read after them to avoid the spoilers. Secondly, the collection is also a standalone work. That means it does not contribute very much to the main plot that you see in Trilogy 1 and Trilogy 2. Speaking of Trilogy 2, oh boy, here we go. It's a-comin'. The time is now. The moment of greatness is upon us all. Behold, in all its glory and all its horror. I feel like the lead singer of a metal band who's trying to hype everyone up before the breakdown. Sorry about that. The age of madness. Industry is booming in the Union. Weapons are becoming more sophisticated, and new mechanized factories are replacing hundreds of workers. Even as the world becomes more advanced, people are getting poorer and more desperate. Businesswoman Savine Dan Glockter, daughter of the feared Inquisitor, is climbing her way to the top of society, unaware that all of her growing wealth and power is making her very unpopular with the people. As unemployment skyrockets and the Union faces economic collapse, war is once again brewing in the north. The young and hot-headed Leo dreams of leading armies to defend his homeland, but the prince also is incapable of providing the funds and the arms that they need. Tensions are growing between the incompetent capital and the desperate outer territories. Yet in this world of smoke and fire, magic remains. Ricker is the first Northman in a century to be born with the long eye, the ability to glimpse the future. And she sees change coming rapidly, violently. Change that will shake the world to its core. Alright, Trilogy 2 sees us back in the Union about 30 years after Trilogy 1. Many of the next generation of characters are actually offspring of characters from Trilogy 1. The book does have some characters from Trilogy 1, but I won't say who, so you don't know who survives. This time there are 4 primary point of view characters and 3 secondary point of view characters, and once again we're just going to focus on the main ones. So Savine Dan Glockter is a lot like her father in that she has charisma off the charts, right? She can charm a room full of people, have them all eating out of her hand. Plus, she didn't go through all that torture and like her father, so she's nowhere near as cynical. She's much nicer. Perhaps too nice. Her issue is her naivety, thinking that all those out-of-work commoners won't make a fuss. Leo, on the other hand, has all the charm of a brick. The guy has no subtlety. He is 100% honest, sincere, and straightforward in all things. His territory that his mother rules is under threat by the North, so he wants to raise hell and fight back. While everyone else is off making money and building factories, Leo wants to fight, save his people, and become a hero.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Prince also is a bit of a lazy guy, but he's also perhaps one of the most morally good people in this world. So he's one positive, funny, and witty guy. He wants to advance the Union's technology and care for the people and stop the war brewing in the North. Yet he has no idea how to do all that. Even the power of the throne behind him doesn't seem to make a difference. There's never enough money, the council opposes him, and his ideas get shot down. It's almost as if there's another power behind the throne stopping him. I mean, it couldn't be, right? Well, also is not going to give up. And Rika, well, her ability to see the future is actually much more like a curse than a blessing. It's always vague as hell, it's never very specific, and everyone always expects this young 16-year-old to know every single action in the future. So, for the most part, Rika bluffs her way through life. In fact, everyone else in the North wants war except her. So she has to play her part very carefully to find the one future where she survives. Plotlines of Trilogy 2. Okay, once again, this is very difficult to summarize for you because these plotlines move so quickly. For example, the first time I read this, a major plotline is introduced in Book 2, and I think, wow, it sure is going to be good in Book 3 when I see the conclusion of that plotline. No! That plotline got resolved in the same book, in Book 2, and by the time Book 3 came around, a newer and more interesting plotline got introduced. I freaking loved it. It was so good. So in the broadest sense possible, there are 3 plot lines to Trilogy 2. So there is that war in the North, there are brewing tensions in the Union's outer territories, and there's the brewing tensions in the capital as industry makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. It's funny because when I lay out those 3 plot lines, man, the war certainly seems like a bigger deal. I won't spoil much about this, but I will try and say it very vaguely. Trilogy 2 actually ties in with Trilogy 1 very well. There is a masterful stroke of what we call literary symmetry. But that's all I'll say. Shh. Okay, representation. I always talk about representation, but it's more than just going through a checklist saying, does this story have black people? Tick. Does it have gay people? Cross. No. When I talk about representation, I want to talk about how does this story represent real life issues and things in the real world? Does it ignore them and pretend they don't exist, or does it confront them head on? Well, Abercrombie confronts it head on in a very grimdark fashion. So it doesn't talk about empowering women, raising up and throwing off the shackles. It talks about the shackles. It talks about the oppression women face in brutal fashion. It doesn't talk about gay people, but it does show a gay character who is forced into a heterosexual marriage and told that she must hurry up and have children. There is a truckload of racism motivating all the wars, so yay, all those problems are there. But it's more about showing and representing the worst aspects of being a minority. It's more about highlighting the problems. I will also add, Trilogy 1 is mostly a male-dominated story. There are female characters, a lot of them are secondary characters, actually all of the main characters, are male. In Trilogy 2, and actually from the standalones onwards, there are a lot more women quite consistently, and it's very much at the point where it's 50-50 from this point onwards. But Trilogy 1's definitely a bit of a sausage fest. Okay, this content warning is going to be a bit extensive. It might just be more efficient if I just straight up list all the awful things in this series. Alright, so let's just get this over the way. The first law features robbery, assault, domestic violence, kidnapping, murder, torture, disfigurement, deprivation of liberty, public executions, public torture and executions, hate crimes, arson, acts of terrorism, mass murder, murder sprees. Oh boy. Sexual assault, incest, accidental incest, war crimes, attempted genocide, actual genocide. This list was a bad idea. The point is, there's a lot of stuff. My wife actually suggested I should do that list to the tune of We Didn't Start the Fire, but I'm not doing that. Take too much work. Couldn't. I'm not doing it, okay? Now, this is where every reader is going to have their own reaction. I am personally very okay with all this stuff.
I can excuse racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty.
You can excuse racism.
But you may not be. So if you are very bothered by the mention of all that stuff, you absolutely do not have to read the series. Yes, even if it means missing out on some excellent writing, there's no point in traumatizing yourself. But if you're unsure, you're the people I want to speak to. If you think, I want to read this, but I'm not sure if I can handle that, I don't want to read something I can't unread, well, I've got a couple suggestions. First of all, you can try skim reading. If you get up to a torture sequence, sequence in book 1 and you don't like it, just skip a page or two. You really can try reading something that way and just self-censor as you go. It's perfectly valid. But my big suggestion, consider trying instead. This standalone trilogy has nothing to do with the world of the First Law. It is a grimdark young adult series, so that means it has been censored. There is none of the violence, none of the sex, none of the heavy themes that you get elsewhere, and there's certainly no torture, but it is still 100% grimdark. So that means it has character arcs that may fail, plot lines that may fail, realism, messy battle scenes, no one's survival is guaranteed, all the kind of stuff you expect from the grimdark genre. So this trilogy is just a brilliant marketing strategy by Joe and his publishers. This is literally written to pitch grimdark to a new audience. Yeah, gateway grimdark, if you will. I wholeheartedly recommend these books. They're a great introduction to grimdark, and they are genuinely good stories, and it's perfect for you if you might be struggling to stomach some of the nastier aspects of the genre. A quick pitch for this trilogy is that the world is dominated by an ocean, so a big ocean right in the middle of all the landmass, the shattered seas, if you will. Prince Yavi was born disabled, which is seen as a huge weakness in the eyes of the kingdom. So one day he is betrayed by his royal advisor and dumped in the ocean to die. Instead, Yavi washes ashore and is instantly taken captive and enslaved. Yavi vows that he will escape the bonds of slavery, cross the entire ocean back to his homeworld, and reclaim the throne that was stolen from him. It's a fantastic series. One little thing I'll add to it, there is an overall plot across the 3 books, but each book has a different protagonist. So So each book does have a different protagonist. Yavi is the protagonist of book 1. There's another... Whoa. So Yavi is the main character of book 1. There's 2 protagonists introduced in book 2, and Yavi is still there. And then another one introduced in book 3, and all 4 of them are protagonists across the series. So that's a little fact about how the structure works. I do hope you'll enjoy that one. So where to begin and how much should you try? Okay, so this is very much up to you. If you know you can handle violence, I wholeheartedly recommend going straight to the First Law trilogy. It is an excellent example. Book 1 is good from the beginning. If you're unsure if you can handle violence, do the Shattered Sea trilogy. Both trilogies have a really good book 1, so you'll be able to tell pretty much straight away if you like the vibe of it. But I have to emphasize 2 things. First of all, Abercrombie really does specialize in trilogies. If you pick a trilogy, you should really try to read all 3 books and appreciate the full picture once you've got it. Secondly, I know I've said it a lot, but it bears repeating, Trilogy 2, Age of Madness genuinely is the best damn thing he's written. Everything else on this shelf is good, but that is better. So if you think, oh, I've read Trilogy 1 and it was pretty good, but I think I'm done with... No, wrong. Go and read Trilogy 2. Okay, and we're done. Guys, that was the world of the First Law and a deep dive into Grimdark and a look into the full published work of Joe Abercrombie. I seriously put a lot of effort into this video, so someone better comment and tell me I convinced them to read Trilogy 2. I swear I will cry if... No, I won't really. So coming up next on this channel is something completely different. We're going to look at Sarah J. Maas and the Akatar series at Court of Thorn and Roses. So if you like romance and you like fantasy, then you'll love Romantasy. I had to do First Law first to get all the cynicism out of me so I can be more supportive for that one. Now, after Akatar is something completely different again. We will be tackling Malazan, Book of the Fallen. We are going to do a big dive, a beginner's guide into everything that is that bad boy. So stick around. There's going to be some exciting stuff going on in this channel in the coming weeks. But seriously, thank you all so much for watching this super long video. Remember, you can always go the next step to support the channel. You can share a video with a friend or tell someone about it, or you can check out our shop, Rainbow Space Unicorn. This is a very ungrimdark shop, let me tell you that. For all things nerdy and beautiful. We have laptop bags shaped like books. We have necklaces and brooches that are fidgetable, perfect for neurodivergent or anxious minds. And we have a bunch of cool and awesome enamel pins for all you book nerds out there. Plus, in the next week or so, we're actually launching a Kickstarter for Fairy Tale bookish bags. Here's one that we prepared earlier. We could not be more excited for. I'll let you know when it's all up and live, and I hope you'll check it out. But this thing is just so gorgeous. Look, it's got the rose on the back, and there's Cogsworth on the side, and Lumiere. Well, bye for now. I hope I'll see you next time. And just remember, everybody, you are gorgeous, you're genuine, you're gallant, you're glorious, and I hope you are very nice to yourself today. Bye now.